Hello, folks. I hope you're having a fantastic day. We're talking about free will these days, and here's a question I got from a person. He says, neurological studies of the neurons in our brain, neurological studies suggest that if we have any free will at all, it's very, very small. Add to this evidence that we're genetically determined, on top of evidence that we're sociologically conditioned, and it seems that our volition, our free will, if we have any at all, is very, very slight. So then he asks, how can you build an entire theological system around such a weak and shaky concept? Thanks for the question. I'm going to spend a couple of video blogs on this question because there's a lot of good stuff in here. Today I'll just say this. I don't think it's quite accurate to say that I build my entire theological system around the concept of free will. The center of my theological system, at least as it's evolved over the last 10 years or so, is really the character of God as it's revealed in Jesus Christ, especially on the cross. That's the center of the center. And then the idea that all of our life and worth and significance and value and security is to be gotten from that one source. I think that's the center of everything right there. That's the center. Now, free will becomes important because it's very hard to make sense of a world in which there's sin and evil, such as we find it these days. Hard to make sense of how that world could have been created by the God who is revealed in Jesus Christ, centered on the cross. This world doesn't reflect that character very, very much. And so free will is, I think, the only way of beginning to understand how an all-good, all-beautiful God, the God revealed in Jesus Christ on the cross, could have created this world when this world is so entirely, thoroughly, completely screwed up. Think about it this way. Free will. Evil has to come either from God's will. It originates either from God's will or from some will other than God. It's really that simple. Could it have originated from God's will? Well, Christians confess that God's all good. And what does it mean to say that God's all good other than that he always wills the good? And what does it mean to say that he always wills the good other than he doesn't ever will evil? So just saying God is all good, I think, rules that alternative out. But even more important than that kind of abstract reasoning is this consideration. The God who's revealed in Jesus Christ isn't a God who wills evil. Jesus, whenever he confronts sin and sickness and disease, infirmities, blindness, leprosy, any of that, he never identifies it as coming from the Father's will. He always identifies it as coming from not either directly or indirectly, the work of demonic forces and Satan or something of the sort. Luke 13, for example, there's that lady who's got scoliosis. She's bent over, and Jesus says, how long should this daughter of Abraham be in bondage to Satan? Acts 10:38 says, Peter preaches that Jesus went about doing good, healing people of all their bondage to Satan, freeing people from the work of Satan. And so he never identifies this as coming from God's will. He always identifies it as coming from the will of others. So here's why free will is important. It's the only alternative to saying that evil comes from God's will. Now maybe someone would say, well, wait, couldn't it come from wills other than God, and yet the agents don't have free will? Well, what does that look like? Think about this. How can evil originate from agents who don't have their own will, and yet you're not going to say it comes from God's will? If God wills them to will evil, then God willed evil. Now you have this reformed idea that comes out of the reformed tradition that God could will agents to will evil in such a way that God's all holy for willing them to will evil, and they are evil for willing the evil that God determines them to do. If I can find somebody who can make that sentence coherent, well, I've been looking for 20 years and I haven't found it. God exhaustively determines an agent to will evil in such a way that God's all holy for creating them to will evil, and they are evil for doing what God determined them to do. To say that violates every sense of moral responsibility we have is an understatement. I can't give meaning to those words. I don't know what that will. It's just another way of saying evil originates in God's will. And then you cloak it over with this in such a way. It doesn't, in the end of the day, I don't think it has any meaning whatsoever. All right, we'll pick up this question tomorrow, looking at the nature of free will and the conundrums it poses and the problems it solves and why it really is quite important. although it is quite conditioned. God bless you guys. Have a great day. See you later. Bye.